Okay, populating. Here we are.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody. March 11th, 2020. Let's be honest, everybody. At least in our industry, we're going to remember this day for a very, very long time. I
It's the
thought
day the music died.
Oh my goodness. I thought that when we decided on this topic for today, that we would have plenty to talk about. And of course, since I posted the description and the live stream last night, the big news, of course, is that NAB is canceled. So there we go. Here we go. Welcome, gentlemen. It's great to see you again after 2 weeks. Caleb, you're looking better than I am with the camera the way I have it set it up right now. How was your trip?
Good. It was very feel very rested. Let me know if you hear a screaming or yelling 2-year-old.
I can, yeah.
Nice. Good. That's good.
And then,
yeah, it's a good trip. Good trip. Rested. Anything you point a camera, any camera for that matter, in any direction, and it looks, Airy Alexa LF. It's ridiculous. Easy to get good images over there.
That's great. I can't wait to see some of the stuff that comes out of that trip. Ben, great to see you. You're back in the Czech Republic from after being out on an oil rig and all that fun stuff. How are you doing other than the obvious?
Doing good, thanks. Had a nice shoot for a few days on the rig. Very hard work, lots of good food, all quite nice, but then flew back into all kinds of Corona nonsense. And then not only is this day quite memorable for the cancellation of NAB, here in the Czech Republic, all schools, universities, cinemas, cultural events, anything with 100 people or more gathered in one space has been cancelled for the foreseeable future as of today. So my kids are both at home. My wife is at home because she's a university lecturer. So it's just been the most surreal kind of day. And there is no end date, but they're saying at least a month for this situation. So my kids are ecstatic about the whole thing, although they are supposed to be sending them schoolwork via email. But yeah, it's this very, very odd time.
Did you read that article? Well, first of all, there is one thing to look up to, which is the Grumpy Penguin is in the chat room.
Oh my goodness!
Welcome, Grumpy Penguin. Nice to have you. Probably the best. Forget it. It's all good. So there's so much inside of my head right now with everything.
Well, while you sort that, we also should mention some of our other lovely people here, which there are many. Victor, Bart, Bill, Harrison,
Trevor,
David.
Tommy, Leo.
Yep.
I'm 360.
360.
Yeah, of course. Larry.
And others. So
Dave.
Good to see y'all.
If you're new to the channel, thanks for coming. We appreciate it. Subscribe. There's a lot of content here. If you're interested in cameras and lighting and all of that kind of stuff, we all have our own take on this, and this channel is no different. So we'll be talking more about that maybe in this particular episode, which is the elephant in the world, elephant in the room, which is coronavirus and all that fun stuff. Just one other thing. Speaking about what you said, Ben, did you see this thing? I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently, because much of China is in kind of a lockdown as well, that they wanted students to do work, and they picked a specific app for them to do their homework with remotely. But the kids realized that if they gave the app enough 1-star reviews, that it would be taken off of the app store.
Oh my gosh.
Brilliant. That's going to be who's going to run the world in the future. And you know what? It might not be such a bad thing. People who are that smart. Talk about beating the system.
Yes. Amazing.
360 grad. It's
that poor app developer. He's like, I've got the virus and my livelihood is gone.
Unbelievable. All right. So before we keep going here, let's get some drinking going, because I sure need a drink today.
Yes.
Working on the C500 Mark II course for MZ Pro, and just finished the stand-up parts of that, scrambling to get that done. Lots of work being done. So what are we going to have to drink today? Let's start with you, Caleb. What's it going to be?
Today, I think I did this on the show. It is a wheated bourbon, Weller, 12 years. And it's delightful. So here I go.
Good. Like the label.
Thank you.
What about you, Ben? What you got?
I'm on the Metaxa, the Greek brandy tonight.
Very nice.
That's what I got.
Good for you. And then I'm going to an old standby now for me, which is the Glenlivet 14. This is the one that's aged in cognac casks. Felt like having that today. So that's what
You're doing very well with that. That's lasted a long time.
Yeah, that's you have
impressed.
not Caleb'd that bottle.
I've had more than one, but this one has actually been around for a while. I was thinking that I needed to buy a new bottle, and when I was going through today, I was going to go for the expensive one, and I realized there was still some left. So we're going to get rid of that today. That's the goal of this episode. Whatever else happens, I'm finishing what's in there, I think.
Grimrock says, who else is drinking Corona? Oh, man.
And then what did somebody said, Bart said, we should have changed the show title for today to Hand Soap and Masks. Ridiculous.
Oh,
Cameron Flask, Hand Soap and Masks. I guess it worked. Unbelievable.
Cheers, gentlemen, and chat.
Oh,
good to be with y'all.
Sorry I had a controversy. Sorry I had to sip before I kind of pre-sipped.
Wait. Oh, and Woody, are you actually in the pub right now? Are you watching this from inside the Union? Evening anyway, but that will be a new thing. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, here we are, gentlemen, and on this March 11th, I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that we're not medical experts. We're not going to give medical advice. What I'd like to do in this episode is...
When did that stop anybody?
Oh, it's not going to stop them in the chat. Here's the deal. We have had a situation brewing because of coronavirus for quite some time, which quite honestly, as Caleb coughs, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No wonder I can describe.
Maybe you can hear me, they can't. Anyway.
So it's ridiculous. Yeah, maybe that's true, actually. So here's the deal. About a month ago, I guess, this thing's been going on for a while. I thought, this really sucks. This is going to affect things going on in the world. But it did not cross my mind at that time that we would be in the position that we're in right now. I don't think most people did. And so when it's not knocking on your front door or your back door, wherever it is, then you think you're sort of isolated from everything. And the first eye-opener for me was the first job I lost, because I realized that this was going to affect me even if it didn't hit my geographical area. And within 24 hours, I lost a fair amount of work because of what's going on, largely due to the inability to be able to get product from Asia to me so I could create educational content. Because that's definitely an egg or eggs that I have in the basket in terms of things. And leading up to the show that got canceled today, it's pretty common for me to be creating a fair amount of content for manufacturers in and around their products, and they couldn't even get the products. So that part is pretty horrible. And and now it's far worse, because now what's happening is jobs are getting canceled locally and regionally that have nothing to do with this industry. And I know that I'm not alone at all.
No, you're not. It's just a huge knock-on effect for everything. And part of the problem, it's not just concrete jobs getting cancelled, it's that everyone's holding off on booking things as well. So the phone kind of has kind of slowed. I'm now there's things coming in terms of people are making inquiries, but it's for stuff from May, June, July onwards. This block that we're coming into, no one's talking about. Everyone's just hanging fire. And even travel, I'm going to the UK next week, but I'm not sure what's going to happen in terms of travel restrictions, because the way that a lot of European states are going right now is that they're really locking things down to just try and slow the spread of this down. So I think it's just no one knows what we're going to be able to do over the next few weeks. And it's a very unsettling, an incredibly unsettling time for, I think, the self-employed, not just in our industry, but pretty much across the board.
Yeah. And it's not just self-employed people. It's a lot of people who work in particular industries. Hospitality is probably getting hit the hardest right now. So if you work for airlines, you work for hotels, restaurants, food and travel industry is getting particularly hard hit. And there's also very real situations happening here in the US and abroad where people are avoiding entire things like Chinese restaurants just because it's a Chinese restaurant, even though it's down the street from you. So it's very hard to really figure out how dramatic this is going to be in terms of short and long-term effects when it comes to work, but also just in terms of the way people are willing to interact, which is pretty crazy, especially because it's happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks. And it's something that we have to talk about because we have to talk with each other about ways that we can be smart. We're content creators. I would say that, and I may be wrong here, but I would say that out of all three of us, Caleb, in some ways you are.
Oh, geez. You too.
But it's a frozen.
That was amazing. In chat, yes, I apologize for the delay.
It's a 5-second delay, but it's better than what's just happened to Jem, whatever.
I know, yeah. This computer combination, I don't know what's going on, but it's delayed. But I just got a laptop. The first time in a decade, I bought a laptop. Over a decade.
Wow. What did you get? The new MacBook Pro? 16?
Yeah, the 16.
Oh, very nice.
Seems like a no-brainer. So
yeah,
hopefully that'll solve all the delay issues. But while Jem, gone. Solid gone now. That was unique. So I'm going
to pick up from what he was saying because I have a fairly good idea of. I think we both knew exactly what he was coming up with. That you're probably, with the work that you do, you're probably the best positioned of the three of us to work your way through this. But I guess the same, you dealing with the same situation that Jem was talking about in terms of that certainly the Asian manufacturers are not being able to ship stuff out for you to be able to do shows on.
Yeah. Luckily, I'm not doing a lot of on-demand stuff. So, I mean, I haven't personally noticed a difference yet. I've been more and more purchasing gear to do videos on. So I haven't noticed, I'm not like a lot of these guys where they get the newest toys like before they come out.
Right.
So that hasn't terribly affected me, but I have a feeling it's going to be a delay. So what's going to happen, and it's just economics, right? So the world's freaking out. People start freaking out. People's like, for instance, you guys are similar to like a lot of the viewers that watch my content. If they're not getting jobs, they're not buying gear or training or whatever. And it's just kind of a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Everyone just kind of freaks out. So it's a little bit different for me. I don't have jobs that I'm going to, or I'm not reliant on gear, the newest gear to come out. But it's kind of just economics. Like I was thinking when NAB got canceled, I started thinking about how many industries that affects and how much money is going to be lost, not only from NAB, the organization, but you think about like B&H, they scheduled a massive party for, a huge event during the show. I bet they're not getting their deposit back on that.
No,
just so many things. Think of all the hotels who people are trying to cancel. Like, just, it's unbelievable. Billions and billions of dollars.
And it's not just, and the thing is, there's an insurance issue. And I don't know what the situation is with NAB, but I know, or I've read that South by Southwest, with their cancellation earlier in the week, that their insurance doesn't cover cancellation due to communicable illness, communicable disease. Yeah. So, but I mean, how many of us would consider this a risk? You know, this is just not something that I don't think's on anyone's radar 6 months ago, that we'd be facing cancellation for this kind of thing. So, you know, for those exhibitors, I don't know, because I've never taken a stand. I've never worked for a company that's had one. I've no idea what their terms and conditions are in terms of this being cancelled. And I was kind of clearly been watching the news because it has a big impact for me with travel. You know, the three of us were all supposed to be working at the show this year. Right. So that has now obviously been postponed potentially to later in the year. They're talking about maybe doing it in autumn, in the fall. We'll see whether that does or doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But you know, if the show's cancelled, and I kind of got the impression that NAB were holding on, saying they were going to run it until the point at which it became completely impossible. And I felt that it was probably that they were waiting from someone above, from Clark County or from the city of Las Vegas, or say, look, this right. Because if they cancel it and there hasn't been a kind of a government advice to do that, I wonder if then they're liable for refunds or whatever else goes on. This is the thing that we just don't know, because there's a lot of money. All the people who have stands, they pay for that up front. So what happens to that? If they hold it later in the year, can it transfer? It's a mess.
No, it's really crazy. It's amazing what fear can do. Obviously it's more than fear. Like, it's an actual virus, and you know, people, I think it's just super scary because it's new. It's got a scary name. And it's kind of escalated to the point where, you know, if you don't cancel something, like reading all these press releases from Nikon, from Adobe, and then NAB, it almost feels like a business decision. You know, like, if we don't cancel, we look like monsters, you know, putting people at risk.
I think, I think there's definitely part of that. That's clearly been something that's been going on, and I've been reading, you know, a lot of people's commenting on Facebook posts over the last couple of days about what at what point are they going to do it? It was clear they were going to do it, and they were saying that really it's the right thing to have done. You know, nobody knows really very much about this virus still. I was talking to a doctor 2 days ago, and they're saying we just, and this is in a big teaching hospital, so we just don't know what it is yet. We don't know how it reacts. It may be better in the summer, it may not.
Yeah.
With the higher ambient temperatures, nobody really knows. And the thing that I think that certainly in Europe that's been done by governments, and particularly here in Czech, is what they're not trying to stop it because they know they can't. I mean, it's just, it's out there. It's going to go everywhere. But if they can slow it down, it means that those people, that sort of 2-3% of people that get it, that are going to be worse affected by it, aren't swamping the health service. So if they can spread that out over as long a period as possible, then it means that the whole thing doesn't collapse under the weight of it. You know, it's a very difficult thing to make decisions on. The financial cost of this across the board is just unimaginable at this point. I mean, you see the airlines. So Lufthansa, who I was supposed to be flying over with for NAB, their A380s, the big double-decker planes, they're flying them at 30% capacity at the moment. So they're talking about grounding all of those things, getting staff to take unpaid leave. You know, it's a really difficult time. I think it's just going to, unless governments actually start funding and giving some kind of compensation for, or not compensation, or paying some kind of benefits to small businesses, it's just going to kill an awful lot, because there's no end to this. I mean, there is an end to it, but at the moment it's going to be 2-3 months minimum, this disruption, I think.
And the government, I mean, depending on your, not to get too political, but you know, a government can't, most governments don't have the funds That's just an awful move, to go into more debt to take care of that stuff. While we wait for Jem, do you think it would be interesting to talk about preventative or defensive measures for stuff like this? Like for you and your production, do you have any kind of buffer or things you do? Let's talk about the buffer.
Yeah.
Things you try to do to prevent droughts where you get nailed, but also after that, is there anything you do when there's downtime to kind of try to make up the difference?
I suppose that what I have been doing is, trying to, on the buffer point, I suppose the first thing is that my business has been like that anyway for a long time, in that there's peaks and troughs.
Sure.
There's a certain seasonality to it. So there's certain times of the year where you're always going to be quieter and always going to be busier. So kind of from Christmas till now it always tends to pick up. And then often through the summer months, July and August tend to be quite quiet. Rest of the year seems to be pretty good. So you kind of know that those things are coming. So I've got into the habit of, when you've done a big job or a few big jobs, you've had a good month, rather than just going brilliant, buy gear, which was my kind of default position. I've now been much better at going, that would buy me loads of cameras, but that would also buy me 4 months of my day-to-day expenses that I don't really need to panic about. And so, but for this, because this is coming into busy time of year for me, I am extremely fortunate that I've just done this big offshore gig, because that will tide me over. If I'm not needing to spend, I'm not needing to travel particularly, then that will last me a couple of months. So it does have that buffer, but that's certainly not planned. Normally you try and keep a little bit in the bank, more than I used to, certainly. Right. How about you? Do you do the same? Or is yours much more constant?
It's fairly consistent, but at the same time, it's, there's no checks, and it's all ebbs and flows. Like a lot of what I do, the payments come in months later. So like if you're an Amazon affiliate, you get paid 2 months later from what you make this month. So that makes for really awkward accounting. There's this one system I've been following to like help with that, and that's don't freak out on many people, but Dave Ramsey is this like American radio guy, and he's got this whole book and this whole thing. And the reason I love that Matt, do you guys know Matt Diavella?
No.
He's like, you should check him out. Amazing stuff. He's a documentary filmmaker who has a channel that's like huge now. It's massive. I don't know how many subs, well over 1 million, I would imagine. And he's like super hip, and he also is into the Dave Ramsey stuff. So the Dave Ramsey thing, most people, when they know of him and hear of it, they're like, oh, geez, that guy's crazy. But he has this thing about like the system. He calls them baby steps. There's 6 of them, and a couple of them are involving emergency funds. So if you like have a ton of debt, you save $1,000 and then move on to paying off the debt. But then after that, 3 to 6 months expenses, having that saved. So I try to make it a point to do that for the personal side, but as well as the business. So like looking at over 12 months, picking the worst month, and then multiplying that by 3 or 6. So like if we have like 3 or 6, just the awful months, then that's taken care of. Because, and for me, it's more steady income across the board. If you look at every month in a year, it's about the same. There's some really, really good ones, and then some that are average. But there's these things that can happen that can devastate content creators. So for instance, Amazon could one day have an error and close my account. And when that happens, specifically with Amazon, it's over. You can't just turn it back on. Like they completely eliminate and erase everything. So 10 years of links, you have to create those all over again. And
they don't care.
Yeah, they're like, whatever, create a new, best case scenario, you get reapproved, but now you have to recreate all the links. YouTube could come up with a new policy. There's like every month there's something happening where there's something going on with naughty people in the comments section. So they just completely take an entire category and turn off monetization. So you just never know what's going to come down the pipeline. So trying to be prepared for that stuff.
Right.
But I know 100% with Ben, like with the whole gear thing, for so long, I just put it all back into equipment, especially when it's good, right? Times are great. You're like, woohoo, let's load up the B&H cart.
But I hate doing it. I used to love it. I used to love spending money, and I've now got into the habit of I hate it. And I think that it really, and the purchases that I used to be quite spontaneous with, I suppose. Now, like I'll sit and fill in the order form like 10 times before I finally hit the. I know I'm going to buy it, but I sit there like stressing about it because I'm like, can I really afford that now? Is that does that take this month or that? And it's always the same. I think because of now living here and life's a bit cheaper here than it is in the UK. Not loads, not as cheap as it used to be, but it's still a little cheaper. And if I've been doing work there, I can bring it here. And I've also been getting more work here. So I'm registered as a business here in the Czech Republic as a separate entity now as well, which means that I'm fully sorted for my insurances and things. So, and I am getting more work here, but the day rate compared to what you get in the UK is like half.
Oh man.
So, you know, it's I'd rather be working there, but then, you know, if I can't travel and they shut down air travel, which may have, you know, it hopefully won't, but it's possible that I can still do some stuff here and I can pay the bills and buy some food. But it's it's just uncharted territory. It all just feels exceptionally surreal.
You know, obviously each one of these milestones in recent history, September 11th, you know, the bubble bursting with the crash in, 2008. And I think very realistically, what's happening right now, at least for me, have been all points in my life that when September 11th happened, not only was I living right outside of New York, and I had a very direct impact to what was occurring in terms of family and friends and everything else. It affected business, but I think back on that, here we are in 2020, you know, my first kid was not even a year old, right? So, and now I have, my oldest daughter is, you know, turning 20. So I was in a very different place in my life when that happened. When 2008 happened, I had a more established business. I was doing more established work. I also had, you know, just had my third kid. And it was a much bigger wake-up call to me in terms of how am I going to support my family and what I'm going to do. I unfortunately am not as smart as Caleb, and I've gone down, you know, a slightly different path in terms of how my roller coaster ride plays out. And there hasn't been a put all your eggs in one basket mentality for a long time, but you do work where work is coming from, right? And so you try to diversify as much as you can, but in reality, a lot of my work comes from creating educational content, or has for the last number of years. And so there's ebbs and flows, but there's predictability in this particular industry in terms of what times of year I'm probably going to get a certain quantity of work. It's not guaranteed, but historically, based on the pattern, it's been very good. And this is the first year that pattern has been broken. And then what happens is I'll get production work where I'll go out and produce an actual larger project. And that's the bigger money that goes into, you know, savings, into paying bigger bills. And also generally when I invest in service facilities like a new camera, or I'm getting a new laptop computer, or whatever those things are that I'm using for my business.
Yeah.
But what's happening with this one is that it's really making me realize that even though I've been saying for years, I need to figure out how to make mailbox money, and I need to stop relying upon individual jobs and day jobs because they only last for that amount of time, and then, you know, that money's basically gone. We're really looking very actively at the business and looking at it and saying, I've invested my education and my resources into creating content for other people for a very, very long time. And I'm not talking about a weekly YouTube video. I'm talking about the fact I've done 5 courses on lynda.com or LinkedIn Learning. I've done stuff, for other brands that are creating educational things. And I'm finally starting to realize that it's time for me to take ownership of the fact that I can create that content. And it may be a little late in the game in terms of in hindsight, but it's time for me to start to build this brand up and what I'm doing and create my own thing, less of I'm just getting hired to create a series of videos. Why aren't I creating the series of videos myself? And so I think in the end, if we all come out of this, or most of us come out of it in a relatively okay shape, we're all healthy and our families are all right, that it's a good wake-up call for me. I don't like wake-up calls like this, but it is going to push me really hard, like it did in 2008 into 2009, I don't sit around. I don't like to just wait for something to happen. So it's going to probably wind up being one of the most productive times for me, because if I'm not getting hired by other people, I'm going to create my own thing. I'm going to create my own content. And that's how the C47 started to begin with. There was zero work. I made $1,500 in about 9 months after my third kid had been born. So needless to say, I was living on credit cards and all of that kind of stuff. So it's time for me to really take ownership, and we're going to take the business and really start to do some stuff. So there.
Uh-oh. Oh, man. I'm so sorry, Jim.
I was hoping there was going to be a big reveal and he was going to give his whole master plan.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
I feel like
he'll be back.
Yeah, he will. I feel like we should also mention, and this is something I think is really important to, I've been talking with family, and my wife and I are both like accounting financial nerds.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just like to plan and think about stuff, and we've been talking about this essentially every X amount of years. There's always something, right? And at the time, it seems like the end of the world, and we inevitably recover, just because the world and humans are resilient. And so I think it's important to remember that this will end at some point, and there will be something else like this in the future. But when you're in it, it just seems like the end of the world. Like, I'm not a doctor, and but this is a virus, a flu, and you think about it's new and we don't know a ton about it, but each influenza wave that comes on over time, we're gonna learn about it. We're gonna eventually get over it.
It's not a long-term thing.
Yeah,
I think these I don't know, but I would guess that in 3-4 months' time, things will be settled down and back to normal again. And
once we peaked when it comes to recorded cases.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's difficult at the moment for everybody, and I agree generally with the cancellation of these sorts of events to a degree, although I'm absolutely devastated about it because of this year of all years. I was looking forward to it more than any other because of the stuff the three of us were going to be doing.
Yeah.
I cashed in 5 years of air miles to fly out business class.
Oh.
Which I won't get back.
Oh, Ben.
And not only just cashed them in, I cashed them in and had to spend like $600 on cashing them in. So it's not like it's a nightmare, the whole thing. But I sort of agree with it because it means that then, I think the majority of us are going to be fine from it. I'm not worried about it from that point of view. But I think that just to keep that, as we were talking about earlier, just slowing it down so everyone can get a handle on it and you're not overwhelming things. I think that's going to be it's good to do it. But I think what Jen was talking about earlier in this kind of using these things as a bit of a wake-up call and going, I am way too reliant, exactly as Jem said, on day rates. I mean, and particularly, you two create content. I talk about making content and think about making content in terms of getting some income from doing that, or at least using it as a marketing sort of tool. And of course I don't. Maybe being confined to barracks for a couple of months might finally force my hand on that front. But I'm exactly the same, and I still haven't come up with a plan as to having that mailbox money, as you put it. Because unless I'm out grafting, I don't earn anything, and I'm getting older, and I notice, I'm creaking a bit and lugging up flights and flights and flights of stairs with big heavy bags. This oil rig job, which is great because financially that's a very good type of work for me, but that's doing 120 stories, 120 floors of stairs every day. With all the stuff on. I mean, you're ruined after 3 or 4 days of that.
Yeah.
And as you get older, I got to come up with some kind of a plan, because I can't keep doing that forever. As much as I enjoy it, you've got to come up with something else. So I think you can always use these things to your own benefit to some degree.
Yeah.
As awful as it is what is happening.
Before you were rudely interrupted by the internet, if people want you to get back on your soapbox, specifically, David.
You were just saying, I've invented this incredible formula to make loads of money, and it is, and then it died. So carry on.
I didn't say that. No, I just said that I have to start. It's not about the YouTube channel. Like, I can start creating 2 videos a week for the YouTube channel as opposed to 1. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about putting in the no, I know you do. It's not that. It's putting in the infrastructure so that I can produce content for people that obviously is supposed to generate income at some point. But I don't have any of that set up. I mean, I don't even capture people's email addresses, which is ridiculous.
It makes you feel better.
No, I know, but the thing is that, there's a certain line, and my wife Jess has kind of pointed this out to me. I always think that education is number one, and I never want to tarnish the brand and say, I'm asking you for something. But at a certain point, I think you have to realize that you're also giving a lot. And to ask for a little bit of something is really part of the exchange. It's, okay, I'm spending a lot of time creating content that doesn't cost any money to people when they want to watch that content. It may or may not be the content that they want to watch, and they get to make that decision. And as long as they're not the people who occasionally show up and say, watch the whole thing, useless, which means nothing. It doesn't tell you anything. It's not constructive. It doesn't say, I'd love it if you created content on a particular subject. It's all about how you approach it. It's about how you communicate. As long as it's not that, I'm happy to continue to create that content. But I also think that I can give value creating content that's more specific to a particular subject matter, and that there could be value in that content. You do camera guides, Caleb, and there's certain things that, from my perspective, I might approach differently than you do if I was talking about a camera. The same thing for all 3 of us if we're talking about lighting or the way that we do things in production. So I think that all of those things are things that I'm thinking about and saying, okay, I'm relatively good at. I'm good at creating educational content. How do I set up the C47 where I continue to create value with free content for people, but I can also dive in some more and stop taking my time and giving it to outside companies? I don't mean sponsored content. That's great. I want to do production. I want to continue to do that type of work. I mean creating educational content on how to use cameras and lighting and the things that I like to teach in a classroom and the things that I talk about all the time. And why am I doing that for somebody else? I might as well do it for the C47 brand. And this is, again, that kind of wake-up call that I go away for a week and I make a few $1,000s or whatever it is. That's all I make. And why aren't I at least taking the chance of saying, it's my time, it's my energy, it might be a little bit of money, but the return could potentially be better in the long term, and it would be my thing. And so that's definitely part of a lot of the things that we're thinking about on this end when it comes to that. And it's not to duplicate what other people are doing. It's to do the stuff I love to do and that I'm interested in. So I'm not going to pick a camera I'm not interested in. I'm not going to pick lights I'm not interested in. I'm not going to try to teach things that I'm not interested in teaching, but it is making me think about putting the foundation and the infrastructure into place for that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. So we'll see how it all works. I don't know.
Let's have a little chat about what we think is going to happen with NAB and rescheduling at this point. Do we think it's going to happen this year? Do we think it is going to come back? And what other events coming up? Because we've got Cinegear in June. That was one of the things I was thinking, that if I could somehow talk Lufthansa into knocking my flights forward by a couple of months, that Cinegear. But then I was thinking, well, is that actually likely to happen?
I want to say one thing. First of all, the one thing that we don't know about my 2-day workshop is it's most likely going to get canceled, but there's actually a question mark in terms of whether or not that's actually going to happen. We're talking about an event that is 20 to 25 people, which is relatively confined. It's not at a convention center. It's off-site. And again, without opening up Pandora's box too much, at least at this present time, is there much more risk doing that than me getting into my car and driving down to my local supermarket where there's, people coming in and out of that store all day long, hundreds and hundreds of people. And I don't know if there is, especially if they're vetted and we make sure that people don't come into the workshop who have any signs of illness. They're not, they don't have a fever, they're not coughing, no sore throat, the standard signs. I think the chances are very slim that the workshop's going to happen, but I don't think it's totally dead based on the email I got today. We're going to have to see. Well, you never know. I'm sure that NAB fought tooth and nail to keep that show open. South by Southwest didn't have a choice because the city of Austin said it's a no-go.
We were talking about this while you were out when you had your first outage. We were talking about the kind of the reasons for hanging on and the fact that a lot of event insurance isn't going to cover communicable diseases. Because this is not something that's been on anyone's radar. And obviously for any NAB, it almost felt like they were waiting for it to have it stopped from above, which might have then sort of been financially better for them. I don't know.
I don't know if you spoke about this in the first of 2 to 3 outages, but before we get on to looking into the future, well, this is looking into the future. The question is this the beginning of the change for NAB? People have been saying for a long time, when you look at shows like Cinegear and BSC, that when it comes to our industry and what we're interested in, it's not necessarily the show that is ideal for our interests. There was the golden age of NAB after the 5D Mark II, at least for us, which was it was the Zacutos and the Kesslers, and it was the, who else, Red Rock Micros, and then you had all the camera companies coming in, and then you had Free Fly Systems, and there was an energy about the show, and quite honestly, there's almost no energy like that at the show anymore. It's about seeing friends, and then there's one energy, and it's called Aperture. That's the only energy. I mean, Airy has an energy, but when we talk about on the community side of it, it's really like Aperture is the only one that's like, who's the torch has been passed to them, and they're really like keeping that alive, right?
Well, I will say, oh, good, Ben, go.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, I do feel we're in a transition with NAB, and it sucks that this year isn't happening because I feel like it's going from old school, the system, the what's the word I'm looking for? There's a certain generation that has passed. And things are changing, and it's very exciting in certain parts of NAB seeing these young companies, because these days you can invent something and have a real thing that you can sell to people super easily. So it's turned into community, and it's no longer companies and emails. It's now YouTube channels and Instagrammers and new, fresh companies, and if they can do what Aperture did, awesome. So it's a really weird time, but I think it's an important time.
Yeah,
and I feel like this year was going to be really interesting because I feel like for a couple of years everyone's been like, "Whoa, this thing's happening," and I feel like this year is going to be a year where it really struck home. But
I think it will change format to a degree, and we've talked about this many times on this show about that Monday morning when your phone would just light up because that was when everything was getting announced, and that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
There's still Blackmagic still do it. I know we're talking about Aperture as being the only ones with any energy, but I still think that Blackmagic use it as a big.
I think you're absolutely right. 1,000,000%. Blackmagic is in there. Yeah, they replaced sort of Apple with that energy in the South Hall,
right?
For sure.
And so, and then again, South Hall, the only other company that's doing sort of big things in there's Adobe. In they have their stage set up the whole time. They normally release their later, or they at least do a pre-release or announcement, certainly, of their new versions of the Creative Cloud products before, and then they're doing all the demos of that on their stand. So there's always a bit of a buzz around that. But certainly Central, there's very little now. Central Hall being the kind of production equipment side of things. There's really very little buzz about that. But as we've said again many times, that the reason that we enjoy it, the reason that we go, for me particularly, it's not a cheap thing to go to. It's and there's some years I get gigs there, but generally speaking, it's quite an expensive thing in terms of time, in terms of money. But I love it because I meet, if I hadn't been to NAB, I would have never met you two. We would not be doing this. This whole world opens up there because it's where everyone comes to meet. So if it morphs in, I don't think it'll go away because I think it's already such an established part of people's year to go to that show. But I think it will change, and I wonder if it'll become a more fragmented thing and that there'll be more side events going on that are sort of, rather than everything being at the convention center. And we saw this a few years ago, that there were several companies who were just not wanting to pay for the stands, and people were renting a suite at the MGM and hosting their event in there. So they were having guys out with business cards going around the show floor. I remember there was some time-lapse hardware company. Do you remember, what was it called, that sort of, that very cinematic time-lapse film? Maybe, yeah.
Oh, yeah. They have the magic carpet slider now.
Yeah, and then they had this. That's what they did. They didn't exhibit on the show floor. No, not Syrup. Not Syrup. It was another company, but it was around the same time.
Okay.
And what's it called? Timescapes, I think, the film.
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
He's an individual, and he used Kessler's stuff. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But it was around that time, and it was tied around the launch of that. And then this company that was making hardware at the time, they just took a suite, and there were a few companies doing that.
Yeah. And
I just wonder if that's what it'll become. It'll be just, we'll go into Vegas for that week, NAB's on, but it all becomes very much sort of decentralized from the main show. I hope it does. I hope that's what it does do, because it's still. And you were talking about those other smaller shows like Cine Gear, and which I've not been to, but BSC, and BSC is great, but it's small. It's 1 or 2 days. It's too overcrowded. You don't get, there's great seminars on, and it's definitely worth going, but it's definitely not the same thing. And in terms of all those evening events that we go to, all that socializing that's kind of organized around it is what it's for. It's what the value in is it for me. The value in going to NAB for me is entirely that. It's that personal contact. So it would be great if that continues to some degree, even if it changes and morphs.
Where do you think it'll change, Caleb? Where do you think we're going with this, and how do we keep this momentum? Because you're right, I didn't even think about that much. For me, I love to go and teach, but it's the community part of it that is absolutely the part that I like the most about the show now. I'm a little, maybe not jaded, because I've been going for almost 20 years, but the dynamic of the show to me is totally different. And it's actually a lot more relaxed now for me because of the way that I do the show. And I don't mind that Central Hall isn't packed all the time, because I'm just trying to hang out with you guys, and chat and talk shop and things like that.
Yeah.
Where do you think, what happens what happens in the next year in best case scenario for you, Caleb, when it comes to that community aspect of it that goes outside of what's occurring on YouTube?
Maybe we've seen, or you guys have seen, especially because I've only been, the first time I went out was when Jem invited me to help him out. And I'm trying to remember when that was, 2012, 11, 12, somewhere in there.
Yeah, but it goes pretty,
13?
I mean, it's gone pretty fast. We're still like 8 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's right. We're 2020 already. Jeez.
Yeah.
But at any rate, how it's gone from, set design with big broadcast cameras and giant television vans to what it is now. More cine. Would you say the Central Hall, or there's been more cine related stuff? Or
for sure. And less satellite trucks between Central and South. Yeah, I would say it's less good old boys broadcast.
Yeah.
But maybe we're in blinders too. But I would say that Central for me feels a lot more like, well, also remember that broadcast has changed a lot. We still have our giant zoom, 2/3 inch lens solutions and cameras. But a lot of what's being shot for even broadcast is being shot large sensor now, right?
Yeah.
So that's changed a lot.
Also the consumer level and prosumer has just exploded.
Mm-hmm.
My first year there, it was like the cheapest stuff was Red Rock, Zacuto, you know, and then there were a ton of booths that were like, wow, well, that's cool, but it's, $30,000. Whereas we lost Ben this time. Oh no. He got it. He's back.
That was fast.
Yeah.
Dang.
Geez. But you think about lenses, just think about lenses in the last year.
Yeah.
And this year, if there was a show, there's so much happening. We have $600 anamorphic lenses, 1.33x, but still, there's just so much happening in all the production, all the disciplines when it comes to equipment. So, and if, like, for an example is my viewership or my viewers. When I started 10 years ago as of February, which is ridiculous, it was all other people learning, cinematography, wedding filmmakers. And I did a poll like 3-4 years ago, and they were almost all YouTubers watching, which I had no idea. When I first did that poll, I was just for kicks, and I was blown away. So, there's a ton of hobbyists out there. Like I would imagine a good percentage of the people watching this right now are hobbyists, like people who just enjoy this stuff. They don't have a, production company. They aren't YouTubers. They just enjoy it. There's a huge amount of people that are into that, as well as content creators. So it's the scale is enormous. And with that comes, because there's so much more people, just look at our genre. When I first started, there was like Jem, Shane Hurlbut, Vincent, Philip Bloom, and like a couple of the people, Cinema 5D, there's like under 15. And now there's thousands of channels covering this type of stuff.
Yep.
So the scale is absurd. Sorry, that was very long-winded.
No, it wasn't. And I will also add that, you brought up Ben Blackmagic also. I think Atomos does a fantastic job of energy as well. So there are some companies that really kind of create energy behind the show. In some ways, Aperture does it better online than they do even at the show. That's kind of their thing. And now with Indie Mogul and everything else. But I will say that it's still an important show. It's still a show that we need to have around right now. I like the community aspect of it. But I always want to circle back to the fact that the people that we're talking to are kind of split maybe. They're the audience you're talking about, Caleb, which are the people who are, interested in this stuff, but they're not necessarily doing it every day for a living. And then there are the people who are making a living doing it. The other thing that I think about is the fact that because right now we don't know how long this is going to last, one of the things that we all know how to do is create content. And I'm not just talking about the three of us. We all know how to create content, right? So try to leverage that. Try to look at the fact that maybe, Caleb, you're not going to do it because you're definitely in your own lane. But if you're creating content for outside companies and for people, try to leverage the fact that they don't want to travel anymore, but they still need to reach their audience. The first thing that a company does, unfortunately, is they stop spending money on marketing and promotion. It's the stupidest thing in the world when all of these things happen, because they need to reach a customer, and they all do it one for one. So the one company who realizes that if they spend some money on marketing and promotion, that they would have a bigger potential audience going forward, is going to be in a better position. So try to leverage, if you're a content creator, getting work, creating content for people who want to reach their audience, especially when they don't want to travel, right? So I'm hoping that the byproduct of this is that people still need to have videos made. They need to create educational content. If NAB is not going to happen, now I'm hoping if people can get their product, they can send it to me and I can create videos for them. Is that going to happen? I don't know. But, you know, you do have to think about those things, because ultimately we're still trying to do what we love for a living, but we're trying to survive. And if we have families, we're trying to take care of our families. That's a real thing. You know, this is not like, I don't go to sleep every night right now, you know, feeling pretty good about myself. There's no calm right now. I'm tossing and turning, and I'm waking up for 2 or 3 hours, you know. They're not panic attacks, but I'm just like, oh shit, you know, it has hit the fan, and it is time to get down to business here, because we don't know what's going to go on. I'm just going to work my ass off and just try to figure out how to get out of this thing, you know. Well, do not be complacent, you know.
And to those people that you were mentioning before who are doing this not as a profession and are doing this as a hobby, you are smart people.
Yes,
you've got a proper job with a proper salary, and you just do this for fun.
God bless you.
You are smart. You are smarter than the three of us.
Oh yeah.
Well, two of us anyway.
Oh yeah, exactly. Two of us.
us.
We got the golden child here. Come on, let's go. Look, even his skin tone.
The golden years don't last forever. Who knows what's next? Snapchat and slap, you know.
Oh snap! Oh dip.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, so where do we go from here? We've got 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
Very interesting chat. I've been reading along with you folks. What now?
I'm going to start a Patreon channel, a podcast, a blog,
a GoFundMe,
sell content, and I'm basically a gun for hire. Let's go. Well, that's not probably the right thing to say.
We're already demonetized because the word Corona is in the title. Anything Corona on YouTube is immediately demonetized.
That's okay.
No question
really?
asked. Yep.
I don't actually care. It's fine. It was worth talking about this and making sure we had this discussion.
So key takeaways: NAB is canceled. We'll see what happens with GEMS classes. I wish I had the capital. I would love to I've been thinking about doing like a meetup here locally.
Yeah.
And it would be hilarious to set something up during NAB, like on NAB days, just like.
Well, we all have flights, Caleb.
Yeah,
I know. And you know what? There's been people in the chat talking about the same thing, saying, I'm just thinking I might go hang out, just do a meetup.
There you go.
Kind of.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Caleb, would you still go at this point? We don't know what's going to happen.
If I'm helping Gem, for those who don't know, and or all three of us will be there for the training. But if that doesn't happen, I don't know. That's that's a tough call because I have some stuff right after.
Yep.
But it depends. It just blows, But this will all end someday. The pie chart, or not pie chart, the graph of people getting this thing will calm down. The panic will subside. And we'll be good big. Hopefully before Cinegear. Maybe this is the first year I go to Cinegear. I don't know.
That's what I was thinking too.
It's a beautiful show, and actually, Ben, there are a lot of meetups, and LA's an Uber town. It might take a while to get there in an Uber, but it's all pretty much hanging out in Burbank and Hollywood anyway. I think it's time for us to start talking about that show. We'll keep in contact about what's going to happen for NAB 2020 in terms of the field workshop. That's obviously not something that's going to have anything to do with people coming to the show. Love your idea about the Midwest meetup and doing something. I still like that idea you had, Caleb, where people come with all of their vintage lenses and everything else, and we rent out like a warehouse and we have like a 1 or 2 day event. We've got some beer on tap and we just kind of hang out. I know that's a funny thing to talk about right now because we're talking about a public gathering. But everybody, wash your hands, good hygiene, be smart about where you go and who you interact with. If you're not feeling well yourself, then do everybody a favor and, stay away from people, especially people who are in those brackets that are at higher risk, who are older, who are very young. And don't even say no lotus of Siam, Guillermo Montesinos. Do not say that, Memo. You
and
are
360. Keep your tongue in your mouth.
Yeah.
And with that, we're at 6:01.
Keep your tongue in your mouth.
There you
3
go.
dongles down. Here we go.
No French, and you're good to go.
And that's the name of our new podcast, 3 dongles down.
There you go.
All right. Love you guys.
All right. Well, it's been real. Jem, you want to take us out?
I just said love you guys and appreciate everybody for coming by, for interacting, for being a part of the chat, for coming to the channel. Also appreciate the new people who are coming in, both to Cameron Flask and also from the new content I've been creating around the Fujifilm X-T4. Looks like I'm getting another one of those cameras in at the end of next week. I've been making some Amazon investments. Huh? What?
You lucky turd.
Hey, look, I'm going to take advantage of it right now. If nobody else has a camera, I'm going to create content around it. You got to hustle sometimes, people. You got to effing hustle. You understand? That's the way it's got to be done sometimes. You got to take care of business. So love you guys. Final words from Caleb and from Ben, and then we're off to our families and to getting back to work.
Wash your hands. Don't panic. It'll all pass. Invest now while prices are down. Move on.
Awesome.
Ben, your turn.
Yeah, buy gold.
Oh gosh.
Bitcoin.
Oh geez.
No, Bitcoin's not working. It's going down. Anyway, don't buy Bitcoin, buy gold. I'd just like to say, thanks for everyone being in the chat, for everyone who's been with us for the last hour watching it. For those of you that are coming in thinking you're watching this live, just about to start now and we're saying good night. Apologies. This is the time zone thing. There's 2 weeks in the year. In the springtime, when the US moves to summertime before the rest of the world does, and in autumn, it all kind of marries up. I had a panic too. It caught me out. So sorry you're not been in the chat, but hopefully you'll watch it back anyway. And see you all next week. It's been a pleasure as always.
Beautiful.
Ta-ta. See you guys next time. Bye.